said at one point, if you take this funding away, don't be surprised if suicide rates go up. So now it's on me. If somebody else, it was beyond fail.
Do they not think that any other donor is going to look at this and ask these questions?
Other donors have.
Did they really say that?
They did.
And ask questions?
They quoted overdose statistics and suicide statistics as a reason why we might want to reconsider.
But they don't provide the service.
So what did you do to their respect?
We have not done anything yet. They're coming back to us, but what we've done is suggested that they revise their application and have some of their funds earmarked for the business manager position. Because nobody else.
Hey, David, how are you? Family and children.
I don't know who Mrs. Hall is. They do. Yeah, she's.
Hey.
I would figure somebody.
Nothing good. I got nothing.
They're missing projections on
I got nothing.
No, there isn't. Because it's all, and because most of this is going to be a discussion, and I'm sure everybody's going to say, what if we do this? What if we do that? I can't try to calculate what every particular thing is going to happen. Well, I'm going to throw something up at about 35% or less.
No, I do have something that before.
Yeah. And that was the last one. This is really the impact, I think, which is going to be on the warrant article. So, I have honestly really never ever sent out any estimates for the impact because then everybody starts calling me. Can you do this one? Can you bring this one? And I'm like, okay, I have it. I can put it up on the screen. Everybody can shadow the splits, and I'll put them up and we'll look at them. It just. If I start trying to figure out what everybody's going to want to look at for a split, I'd kill a tree by the time I was done.
increasingly, I like that.
Oh, so
No, you said if I do it.
Well, I'm curious.
you guys can work that out. Or are you going to put them back in?
I pull my papers.
Yeah, I know that. Oh, thank you.
So I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance Committee for Thursday, January 21st to order. We have minutes. Do we have minutes? So, do we have minutes?
Yeah, from the 7th and the 11th.
So is there, have you all had a chance to review? Has everyone had a chance to read? John, I'm going to.
Don, shut up.
Have you had a chance to review the minutes?
I have.
Is there anyone who would like to make a motion to approve them? Yeah. Second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
You know, I'll say a lot, the minutes are a lot better than they used to be. You know, that's all.
It's all in now. Well, it's a team effort, but there's. Terry takes the.
Very, but I'm just saying, I can remember when we used to have a lot of correction.
Oh, okay, right, okay. So that's a good measure of it. So.
Yeah, I think so.
So the agenda today is to discuss, to get a presentation from Brian on the sewer articles. I guess just to update everyone that the Board of Selectmen, well, first we had a meeting with the sewer work group, the former sewer work group, and David Worth and I were there along with Matt Fee and Nancy Wheatley yesterday, and my recommendation was that they really had, and Brian obviously made the presentation, but we spent a lot of time talking about the fact that the groundwork and the kind of outreach is critically important for such a complex project, and that that hadn't really gotten going in an effective way yet. So there was a conversation about should they pull the articles or not, and maybe they should. The group so anyway, last night, I think that sentiment was, I didn't go to the meeting, but that sentiment was also discussed too. And the Board of Selectmen voted to only put forward the article on Monomoy and Shimo, and to pull the articles related to Somerset, Nantucket, and the Plus.
No, they actually, they're putting forth, well, what's now known as Nantucket Harbor Shimo, which was affectionately known as Monomoy before, and the plus parcels.
And the plus parcels.
Right, because those two combined qualify for 0%. Okay, so.
So
that's-
Nantucket, Somerset were deferred. So with that information,
Okay.
that will change certainly the conversation and maybe change your presentation, but Brian.
Well, I mean, it kind of does. I actually have already removed them, not completely from the impact of the calculator, but I have taken them out in a little bit. So what we have now, this did previously list all 4 areas. It now only calculates for what's known as the Nantucket Harbor Shimo area and the plus parcels. And what we've done is we had Woodard and Curran go back, and we've done a revised cost estimate, which is reflected here. These projects combined, the plus parcels have increased by about $3 million from the original one that we had done, that we've been using for a period of time. And then the part of the needs area known as, well, just for short and sake here, is Shimo, actually has increased by about $2.5 to $3 million as well. And what we have done is we've actually inflated these all the way to the year that we believe that they will actually be started. So the plus parcels have been inflated through 2017 at 4% annually from, I think it was back in 2013 when this was actually done. The original estimates were done, and then the Shimo area, I'm sorry, Shimo has been inflated through 2017, and plus parcels have been inflated through 2019, because that's when we estimate that that'll actually start. So then the calculation then on the left-hand side is set at what the Board of Selectmen have voted, which I believe is going to be on the warrant, the 60/40. Is that correct? We left the language on there?
Well, we did, but I got some email today from town council saying that you should be very careful about the percentage that you put in the article, because it can have a scope problem if it's
Right.
meant to change, so we might be taking it out.
Okay.
Would you explain that, scope problems?
If there were to be any kind of an amendment
Okay.
to something other than 60/40,
Right.
the moderator might rule that it's out of the scope of the article.
It could change it materially, which would be outside of the scope, right?
Yeah.
So is what I think they had said before, right?
So the recommendation or the advice from town council is, I think, don't put a specific percentage in.
But is ever my hope that making the decision on the split for this project will be what's implemented on all on additional projects?
I think the selectmen's position is the same, and they seem to have settled on 60/40. So whether it's in the article or not, I think that's what their position is.
What was the reasoning for picking these again? Was the percentage of the loan amount, or for the percentage for financing, is that what it was?
Well, all 4 qualified for 0%. Okay, so that was the original first rationale for these 4, and I think a few of these have the greater need than the other areas, and I think that's what the sewer planning work group had come with. The sewer planning work group originally had advanced what really was known as Shimo, which I think is actually a different area. But when we learned that if we combined the Nantucket Harbor Shimo area and the plus parcels together, we would meet the qualification rules for 0% interest. That's what the selectmen at a meeting, I think, way back in August. Was that when the applications were due, Kara? When we, so back then, the selectmen agreed that we should put forward the Shimo and plus parcels if we could get 0% financing. And then last night, they made the vote on which 2 projects they wanted to, or which article they wanted to remove. and which projects we're going to advance, and they felt strongly about moving forward with the Nantucket Harbor Shingle first because of the harbor, and then the plus parcels have to go along, or else we wouldn't get 0% financing on that, and we would be at interest market rate for the rest of that. So that's how we've got to that, and then we have calculated all of the costs based on what the selectmen voted at an October meeting for the split to be at the 60-40. We can do any range of changes to this. We've shown this essentially two ways just to kind of get an idea. The estimated betterment cost applied equally, as I explained before, essentially takes the 60% that's allocated to a betterment and divides it by the estimated number of connections in the actual needs area. So for the Shimo area, it would be 212, and in the plus parcel area, it's 190. So if we applied it equally, you'd have a betterment of approximately $78,000 or $41,000. The sewer planning work group decided that they thought that the land value was a better way to calculate to apportion the betterment. It does fall within the way you can do it under the betterment statute. So if we apportion it by land, there's a very wide range of what the betterment does. So I attempted to give people an idea of what it might look like in those areas by just computing what the average was, because there's really no other easy way to define it, to give people an idea of what it might look like in the area. So using land value and calculating the average for those two areas, Shimo would be an average of 99,000 and plus would be an average of 49,000. Underneath that is what would appear on the tax bill estimated, because this is very preliminary as we go through this. So what happens when you better that is you can pay it all up front. You can apportion it from 1 to 20 years on your tax bill. This assumes 20-year apportionment. It doesn't get into what would happen if they did it, one person did it for 1 year. It's just, this is if we apportion that over the 20-year length. And what it's also done is it apportions the cost, the $16 million to the betterment and the $11 million to the tax rate at a 90-10 split, with 90% being eligible for 0% interest and 10% having to be borrowed at market rate, because under the SRF program, design and engineering costs are not eligible for reimbursement, only construction costs are. So it apportions the costing to run this modeling at a 90-10 split. For the part that we would have to borrow in a market rate, we have assumed 3.5%, and we have assumed a betterment calculation of 20 years. The legislature and the governor did recently just sign a bill that would allow towns to accept what they have to accept it, correct? If I understand it correctly, the apportioning up to 30 years. Okay. So the governor recently signed a bill that would give communities the option upon acceptance of the statute to apportion betterments up to 30 years, which is something we could look at. It would, we are looking at various options, but if we did apportion these over 30 years, SRF funding for 0% requires a 20-year amortization schedule. So if I apportion the betterment over 30 years, I'm reducing what I would collect annually, and therefore we would have to find another funding source for that. Now, I'm not saying that this is insurmountable. I'm just saying that it's something we would have to look at, how to fund that gap for the 20 years, because you would make it up in the last 10. You get it all back in the last 10. So below is the impact per $100,000 of value to a property owner in the town. And at the very bottom, what we have done is the average residential value all in, doesn't matter whether it's year-round or second homeowner or whatever, is $1.784 million. So we have calculated what the tax impact per on that individual property would be, and then we've also calculated it on the all the properties that are strictly residential year-round here, and that has risen to $1.144 million, and so we've calculated both tax impacts there. Up above it, again, it shows the actual tax impact per $100,000 of value for each project.
Now, you're going to charge connection fee also of $8,000, so you roll that into that number?
That is not in that number. This is strictly those costs are not built into that. They would have to charge the sewer connection fee and the in the privilege fee, as well as whatever the contractor that would be connecting the sewer would charge.
As well as destroying your septic.
And whatever, and if you have to, whatever decommissioning of your septic would need to be done as well.
It's usually included.
Is it, okay.
Brian, just to start at the top, you have roughly the same number of connections. I don't know what the map looks like for Shimo versus Plus, but I'm struck that, one is more than twice the gross cost of the other. I mean, is it just miles of pipe? Is it complexity? I mean, just, when I think of that sort of area of Nantucket, the harbor around there where Shimo is, doesn't seem like it's that big an area. So.
It's the distance required to get between the parcels. So there's an awful lot more length of piping than those properties or something. The plus parcels that are very, very close together. So that's not as much.
This was understood the plus parcels were sort of disparate, kind of scattered around the perimeter of existing.
No, it's a couple of different neighborhoods, none of them attachment. So they're developed subdivisions that don't have sewer. There's quite a few connections in a very short area.
But I think to add on to the question, sorry. But again, those numbers are based on sort of a professional estimate, or is it kind of a rule of thumb, X numbers of miles of pipe?
Level estimate, they measure the length of road, counted the number of dwelling units, and develop the number using.
So this is kind of a game changer in terms of the conversation, town meeting.
When you talk about, I've been involved in it, if you connect to the sewer and you have a septic, you have to, when you call it decommission your septic system, does that,
Yes.
and what does that mean?
It means pumping out the tank and then crushing it. It typically stays in place.
So you don't pull out the leach field and,
What do you say, crushing? How do you crush it?
hit it with a back.
Bang it cover with tobacco.
And then fill. Fill.
Guess you can't use it as a storage, so. The bomb shelter.
So what we have also done is, I actually was on a phone call with Cinder about it. We've been working on modeling all four into the tax rate calculation, and we have eliminated two based on the selectmen's actions last night. And they're building this into the entire capital structure and going to segregate this so we can see it as well, what this will do to the tax rate over the entire life built on that, which I'm supposed to have a draft probably by Monday morning to review to make sure it has met all the assumptions that we've put in it. So it is something that we are working on, and as we go through this process during your review of the warrant and as we get ready for town meeting, that will be something that we'll be able to discuss as well and show those impacts. But they should be very similar to what we projected.
You know how many registered voters are in Nantucket Harbor Shimo area?
I do not know that answer.
I don't, but I would venture a guess that it's much
Ten?
fewer than, the
10
other.
maybe?
I don't know about 10, but
Oh. Okay, 20?
less than 100?
Probably 10.
More than a gaggle?
No, I just know there's nobody beyond. There's nobody. There's nobody back there. There's one person back there, Steve Anderson.
Yep.
And you've done this better in cost, but just talking to Jim on the average.
Yep.
What's the range?
40 to 450. $450,000.
I know, I understand.
It's based on land value. It's the land value. So what we did when we calculated the land value is we summed up the entire land value in the needs area, exclusive of land bank land, land that's already been identified as unbuildable. And then we've taken every parcel as a percentage of the total of the needs area. And then we have assigned, based on that percentage, a portion of that cost to every single property. We use the assessed values as certified. Yep.
That's true.
So that's how you get to an extremely high value. If you have a very valuable piece of property, then you would.
And location.
And location, yeah. Now, as I've explained, I think I actually explained it when I gave this presentation to the Board of Selectmen a couple weeks ago, and I did talk about it yesterday with the sewer planning work group. One thing that more than likely will happen is that as we move forward, when we're using land value, there'll be another reevaluation before all of this is done, and these numbers will more than likely change again before the betterments are issued.
Mr. Chairman? One question. Brian, I guess maybe I'm a little slow on this. The $40,927,368.
Yep.
That's the cost of the project that'll be in the warrant. Is that correct?
That's the cost of the two projects together.
Okay, cost of
Right.
projects
So
together.
Nantucket Shimo is 27 million.
Yeah, and plus
then
is
plus is
13.
13 million.
So on the article, these will both be in one article, and so that'll be the appropriation in the article. Is that correct?
But it'll really be in your.
Well, whatever, the motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
We won't have the motion, the motion will include this spread. Does that make the 60/40?
No, but the motion will have the total number.
So where's that made, on town meeting floor, or?
Is that a selectman? Is that the discretion of selectmen?
I'm sorry, your motion would, I should have brought a copy, what I had so far. I think it'll be to something like, in simple terms, to raise 40 million and for 60 to be assessed to the abutters and 40 to be under the tax rate subject to a 2.5 debt exclusion.
And that won't be a problem. You mentioned something about a scope issue before.
The scope issue was if it were in the article.
Okay, so in the motion it's fine.
In the motion, it should be fine.
Okay.
I think that you have to do it in the motion, if we're sticking with the 60,
Right.
40, or whatever.
It's our prerogative to change
We can change.
the motion to,
50-50.
All right. Other questions?
Yeah,
Nope.
so at town meetings, this article gets put forward. So what are people gonna think that they're approving? Raising $40 million
Authorizing the town to borrow.
to borrow the 40% of the 40 million, 16, basically borrowing all 40.
You have to authorize all 40.
All 40.
Oh, right, okay, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to proceed without getting another authorization for board. So you have to authorize the entire 40. The motion would include a split and be contingent, and I believe the tax part is contingent upon a successful debt exclusion vote.
Yeah.
Which will happen,
The following week at the election. Right, there'll be a ballot question for that.
And one other question. I guess I didn't attend the meeting or listen to it. As for Nantucket and Warren's Landing in Somerset, was there any talk about that for future years?
Yeah, we kind of talked about it the next year.
Next year? Both at once, or that they get that?
I think they were saying both at once.
Okay.
Don't you have to do Somerset before, if you do Somerset?
You should.
Somerset needs to be concurrent with, approved concurrent with Nantucket, right, Carl?
There's a cost of approximately $7 million to do that.
Remind me what the,
So, what's the thinking, we're talking, this is a switcheroo, from my perspective. What's the thinking?
I think part of the thinking, if I might say, there's a couple of things. First of all, I think the board was really getting a sense that the amount of money we're talking about to go forward at town meeting was huge. And the impact is going to be so significant that it's going to be very difficult to try to convince people between now and then that part to make them maybe more palatable for your voters. The Nantucket Harbor Shimo project is important because it's the closest one to the harbor, and this is all being done for harbor water quality, drinking water quality, estuary water quality, and it will have the most immediate impact on Nantucket Harbor Shimo.
Did the board give any consideration to splitting them, but putting forth two articles and letting the voters decide if they wanted to do either or both?
Between Shimo Harbor and Plus?
No, Shimo Harbor Plus, and then Nantucket Somerset. There's two separate
There
articles.
were two separate.
Okay,
And
and they just
they-
decided not to go, not to.
They decided not to go with Nantucket Somerset.
A lot of it was, the amount of outreach you need,
Yeah.
it really, so.
Yeah.
And also, to be honest, the number of registered voters in Nantucket Harbor and Shimo is minuscule compared to Somerset and
Yeah.
so it's a.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Now, I'm a little slow today.
I mean, that may be true, but I mean, this strikes me as kind of a mistake. And costs continue to escalate.
They haven't.
Let's just keep pushing that pile of snow out in front of it.
They talked about that, and I mean, it's a tough decision to put it forward. And if we don't do anything, we have the state looming in the background.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like your suggestion. I mean, put them both up there, and if it fails, it fails. But to not even put it forward, I mean, we're sort of missing part of your outreach process. I mean, you got to tell people about this at some point.
Well, we could put them forward ourselves.
I would be, in 5 seconds thought, I think that's not a bad idea.
What's the total estimated cost of the Nantucket and Somerset projects, roughly?
About 61 million for Nantucket Warren's Landing.
Okay.
62.
Almost 62 million, and then 119, 200, 100, and then about 17 million for Somerset. So the total is about 119 million and 61 of it. So it's about 61 and just shy of 62 and 17 for the two.
79.
So about $79 million more.
Oh, plus the 40, I guess.
Plus the 40, so it's
119 for all of them.
119 million
Okay.
for all four
Okay.
projects.
I see.
It's been a while since I've read both studies, but I would think that, I came away from the studies, named myself, that what we call plus parcels in Nantucket Harbor, Shimo, had, there was a lot of questions about what was causing, a lot more questions there about what was causing pollution in the harbor than there wasn't in Nantucket. I think most people, the feeling was that sewers were definitely an issue at Nantucket. There was some question about that. There was some question about if we ever got really hard about fertilizer, restrictions, that would have more of an impact on the big harbor, and there's more of that type of thing used in that area. That was the feeling that I got coming away from it.
Yeah, and that's what.
And the thing that really is going to come up in the meeting, and I can tell you this, and that's just what's going to come up, is the people that would say, well, what are we doing about fertilizer? Because it was clear in those two reports that fertilizer had a big impact on the pollution.
Fertilizer is tricky. We have more staff resources that are going to be dedicated to it this spring, but you can't ban fertilizer. So it's kind of hard to enforce something you can't ban. And it's also, there's issues about going on private property. There are issues about proving what exactly is being applied. We have had a number of education courses with licensed people. They can be fined for not having a license, and there's going to be a much stronger campaign on that. There's been talk about asking homeowners and or landscapers to name their clients in a landscape and putting it online. There have been suggestions about putting online whenever somebody has a violation, published in some manner. There are a few creative things I think we're trying to work at, but the regulations, there are constitutional issues with how far you can go with these regulations.
But, there is a kind of fertilizer that doesn't pollute the harbor, is that correct?
I don't know if there's a fertilizer that does not pollute the harbor, but there
There's
is.
nitrogen, there's nitrogen.
Yeah,
If the plants want it, it's probably something that's not real good for the fish.
but there are,
But I thought there is a products, there are a list of products that,
there's
Yeah.
products in best management practices
Yes.
that are much lesser nitrogen concentrations.
and why can't you, why can't the town mandate that those products be used? Tell me why. I mean, you have a policy that
There are,
we don't use salt on the roads, I guess.
well, we do,
We do now.
Oh, you use salt.
yes, but that was just a local,
And you've always used a little bit of salt to make sure that it's not salt that Lehman uses. It's a salt that sticks sand to the road.
This year, we're not using sand at all, we're using calcium chloride treated salt.
I think,
Well, that's an issue too.
my understanding about the fertilizer is that the Federal Department of Agriculture, under Federal Department of Agricultural rules and regulations, municipalities cannot mandate or require or ban particular fertilizers in their jurisdiction. It's up to that group to do it. This is my understanding. I have asked town council for a more in-depth review of what more we can do. I haven't heard back yet. Yeah.
So it sounds like the issue of salt is going to also come up, because I think the perception is that using salt on roadways contributes to bad things.
It's going to be grown.
Runs off into the ocean.
So,
It's the fertilizers, the nutrients.
no, I mean, the perception is, so when we talk about the fact that we only use salt now, that seems to be, whether it's true or not, at odds publicly with people who think that's a bad thing.
I'm not really talking about
So, well, I mean, people will, people will raise the issue.
Well,
You're gonna have to have.
You don't have an easy answer on the fertilizer at this point.
at this point, I do not have an easy answer on the fertilizer, other than we're doing what we think we can do to deal with it.
Well, certainly Nantucket Harbor and Schimmel was the area that was less, I thought, less impacted, certainly on scale relative to Nantucket and Warren Landing.
I would agree. That's what I thought too. That's from the estuaries report at least.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you, we showed the amount of the loss was like $1,861.
Yep.
What's the impact on a home that's worth $1.2 million for a regular taxpayer if we're splitting this?
Well, if we split it 60-40. $15.78 in the plus area and $33.54 in the Nantucket Harbor Schimmel area.
Per 100,000,
No, that's the impact, because it's,
just $15.
yeah,
So
because
if
it's
we,
$1.32 per $100,000 of value,
Yeah.
okay?
so if we didn't have a betterment, the average person's taxes would go up $30.
Well, that's at 60-40, that's not at any other split.
All right, so I'm just trying to show the huge
We
difference.
just added Nantucket back to the.
Instead of a guy paying $1,800,
We just added Nantucket back.
and we just put 100% of the taxes,
Well, it also says that everybody else is, the other 16,000 minus the taxpayers we have, their taxes are all going up 4704. Everybody's paying $47.
If this passes at town meeting and if these prices hold, sure, absolutely. But as of today, if this passed and we went there, the estimate is that your taxes, your total bill would go up by that.
If it was $1.2 million.
If it, well, no, I put
With
it
that
that.
size of home, yeah, I got you.
The
49,
average
32.
residential would go up about 150 if you did all the projects.
Yeah. So if everybody paid, it'd be $150 a piece.
That's
Split it up the other way.
No, that's 60/40, doing the whole project at 120 would be about $150 a year, right?
Yeah, this is only calculating on the two projects, and this is only 40% going to the tax rate. It's not,
Right.
it's not anything else going to the tax rate. It's 40% of the entire project's going to the tax rate.
So it'd be 15. So I'm just trying to say, if you just,
So if it was 100% on that.
100%, yeah. You-
Well, then just-
What I'm trying to say is, instead of giving some poor guy a tax bill of $4,800 extra a year, you spread it along the whole town,
That's it.
you'd get maybe $60 for everything.
Yeah, so what's 100%?
I'm not sure where the 4,800 is coming from. but-
Well, I'm sorry, 4,096.
You can't add those two together, because those are two, the betterment in Shimo is only for Shimo residents.
Okay.
The betterment doesn't, it's not 4,000 plus 1,800?
No, I'm not saying
Okay.
that. I'm just trying to,
Okay.
I'm just trying to look at an average,
So put 100%
I'm
in.
doing
the average tax bill.
So that's what it would be right there.
So we'll go from 47 to 170.
Right. So if it was all on the tax bill, then if you were a year-round resident, on an average valuation, the taxes would rise by, estimated to rise by $117. It doesn't matter where you live or what your residential status is, your taxes would be estimated to rise by $190.
Okay.
Brian, did you say we're using 4% as a figure for the increasing cost?
Yes, which is based on Woodard and Kern's most recent experience with not only projects, but a review of this book that they get on what construction costs looks like.
So that's $71 million to,
79.
79 million? That's pretty good, about 20%, just because we don't want to.
That's not as good. I'm not sure yet, though.
Tax bill
Potentially,
in
yes.
year two, the impact in year
We
two,
should figure
on
that out.
20
because it
or
is
30,
That's right
you're
there.
gonna have to pay both bills anyway, but we're gonna pay an extra
Go from
Possibly,
117 to 180.
$4 million or something. Close total cost of it, I think, seems.
Yeah, you don't,
See what I mean?
Right.
And Brian, this model is set up to
Residential,
allocate based on.
residential taxpayer repair is $17.
If you did it
But
just,
if you weren't one of those
Well, it
people
models
who
on
live in
both,
a condo,
because,
you'd pay
okay, so if we go back to 60/40, okay?
Right.
That's great.
It models both, okay, so you model the estimated cost,
Oh.
if you applied it equally, and then the average
Oh,
land value, so
okay.
it models,
I'm
it
sorry.
shows you
I
what the
didn't
impact
catch
is
that part.
modeling both of those scenarios, and then it models the 40% for the
So
tax
our
bill.
tax is
Okay.
$47.
So if you have any
Yes.
betterment, it'll always model both of those scenarios for you, and then it'll model what the remaining is that goes on the tax bill.
A lot more.
yes.
So one of the things you need to
And I can't
understand
vote.
is that the betterment cost under this arrangement will be greater than the tax bill for a house with the values that he's got there. Okay? The betterment charge per year will be greater than the property tax that the person has to pay for a house valued in those numbers.
Sure.
So I know we don't have, that you're not collectively the technical folks, but the consultants continually say that the problem is septic systems, but we know that there's a huge nitrogen loading fertilizer problem.
That's what we're discussing
We
before,
were just talking about that.
which is that, our recollection of the report, the estuaries report that Matt brought up was that for Nantucket Harbor and Shimo, it was fertilizer related and not septic related. So, it was, and the question wasn't that, why do that one first, but why not do Nantucket? So, but your issue about the betterment's also true, and
Nantucket is 100% septic, and the harbor, Nantucket Harbor, is the jetties, the fertilizer, the stormwater, and then the sewer. So all of those contribute to the increase in nitrogen for Nantucket.
I just think we're not talking about Nantucket, sewering Nantucket or never sewering Nantucket. We're talking about asking for the money today or asking for the money soon. So it's just going to cost more money. I think, even if it gets shot down this year, it's worth putting it out there. So next year you can say, hey, we told you to do it last year because it was going to save you this much money. And see how this number is bigger? It's going to be bigger next year if we don't improve it. I think we should take as many cracks at it as it takes.
It seems to me this is a project that's been mandated that the town attack, and I mean, it's a big long-term project and a huge amount of money, but I don't think the first step is something.
One thing that the board talked about was, this is done, there's only one article on it. But they talked about if we can get our public outreach act together a little better, maybe we will have the fall special town meeting and do Nantucket summer sometime.
Then why don't you just defer them all? Why not take them as a package?
I'm not on the board, so.
I understand. No, my only concern, this is a little obviously subservient, but I'm concerned that the allocation between the general fund and the council will change as the number of registered voters in the sewer area increases. And I don't think, regardless of where I live, I don't think that would be fair. And it's just
Mr. Chairman, Libby, did the selectmen approve the warrant last night?
Yes. And I'm planning to get it to you as soon as possible. There's some
No.
legal stuff we can fix up.
The only reason I asked is just pertaining to this discussion. That's not for, we'll get it when we get it. No.
Let's just do
And
the,
is, I'm sorry, no, I was just gonna say, is it in at 60/40?
No, that's our motion.
Okay, so the board approved the project at 60/40. However, there's an issue with whether or not it's a good idea to have 60/40 specifically in the article, because if it would, there would be an amendment to change it, there might be a scope problem. So I think it's likely that we will not have 60/40 in the article, so the board will in all likelihood ask you to.
So we make the motion, we can put it in the
You gotta have it somewhere.
We make, yeah, we do that.
Yeah,
Yes, we could. And I like the sewer work group myself.
how does this affect, we always talk about capacity, all these connections, where does that put us on capacity for our sewer plant?
The CWMP that was updated recently, calculated all of the contributions from all of these projects. It increased the flow to the plant by 500,000 gallons of flow per day. That's the so we have applied to DEP and are about 75% on the way for approval to increase our discharge from 3.5 million gallons per day to 4 million gallons per day. And that will accommodate all of these projects.
Well, when you say we have the, without spending any money and expanding the plant, we have the ability to produce, to do.
Well, we did get 8.8 million at last year's town meeting,
Oh.
and we are presently doing work to
That's right.
increase the capacity.
All right.
And I can't say they didn't spend money.
No.
Not as much.
But what we heard from Kara, I think, the other day was the issue of the sewer heads. We did. Want to comment on that?
Well, that's the,
Or maybe that was from.
that was the area that was of most concern to DEP. And as part of the groundwater permit that we are on track to get, the town is required
That's a good question.
It only goes to fiscal 19, and by not doing the article, we will lose the approval we already have for the present year, but it can be reapplied for Nantucket enhancement.
But as we've heard, there's no guarantee. That's what you said Tuesday.
Well, I can't promise that if
No,
we
I
lose it,
understand.
that we're gonna get it back, I mean,
Right.
And they are, that's what Nancy Whitney said, maybe they are phasing it out.
well, the
Every
thing,
year, not-
the thing that you have to remember is that the authorization runs out in 2019. If these were to be approved, and the application is due in August, is that correct, if I remember correctly? Or June, okay. So if they were to be approved again, and then we had a successful votes for those projects, even if the authorization for the program ended in 2019, we would still be eligible for 0%. It doesn't, you don't have to have them done by 2019. We would have to, we wouldn't lose the authorization.
So-
So,
You have to, the town meeting and an election have to approve them by 2019.
well, actually, it's on a yearly basis, so if we did it, if
Okay.
we got approval
Okay.
again in 2017, we didn't, just like we're now doing now, since they're not on the warrant, we're gonna lose the approval. We have to
Okay,
go
what
back
Kara
through the
said.
approval
Okay,
process.
all right.
So
Okay,
the
all right.
actual authorization of the program itself tentatively is scheduled to be phased out. I'm not sure that it is going to end up being phased
Mm-hmm.
out, but as long as we had approval and had successful action, then we would still be eligible. We
There's
wouldn't
also
lose
the issue
the
of
funding.
when you reapply, it is impacted by the other applicants, and there's more and more sewering going on with
Mhm.
Cape Cod.
That's a good point.
So it's,
Okay.
The more
Well,
I think about it, the more I disagree with the fact of putting what I call the switcheroo as far as what comes first and what comes second. I think if you really want to irritate the electorate, you do something like this, and then you hit them with a biggie and then afterward. And then, in other words, I think if you're going to talk about it, you got to talk about the
doesn't
whole
do any
ball
good to talk
wax.
about this.
You got to lay it all out.
It doesn't do any good. It did anything to move. Were you there last
Afraid to do that, you're afraid you're going to get the votes.
I was quite shocked. I still was quite shocked because
Somehow
my
there's
understanding was
something wrong with it.
Warren's landing back.
I think we've got to lay
Is
it
that
out,
correct?
say this is what it is,
What the hell?
and make the point.
Well, Sam and Harbor.
And I know a lot of people don't understand that. If you don't do
Wish I had
something,
gone last
the
night.
state's going to tell us what to do. And the difference is, if they'll tell us what to do. at
That makes
point,
sense. I understand that.
and right now, we can figure it out ourselves.
so at the conclusion of our meeting yesterday, and I think we were still there, David. I think we were still there, David, at the conclusion of our meeting yesterday, the consensus of the group, I believe it was, which is the group that the recommendation, not in writing, but that, because of the lack of outreach that's taken hold, you might want to keep them on, but we probably pull them as we got closer to town meeting. That was kind of
I wasn't here for that. So
No, I know.
yeah. I had that.
And then it's really the reason to keep them on was really, there was no transparent, was to keep the pressure on to get the outreach going. Because it's so easy.
Do you have a map of these areas? Because I remember last time we had maps of Monomoy, it ended up halfway to
Sarah
Wisconsin.
actually has, I don't have maps on my thumb drive
I only
with me.
But these are the plus parcels. This is Monomoy, or not Monomoy,
Whatever
Harbor,
it is.
Shimon, Blue.
Whatever it is.
This is Somerset, and this is Nantucket, and that's London.
That's all right. All right. Well, that does change the whole thing.
I guess there was a part of the conversation yesterday where that, while we've been talking a lot about the split, tax rate versus the betterment, there are so many constituencies that have various perspectives on how this will impact them. So we've got the people in Tom Nevers who said, we want 100% betterment because we'll never get sewer, and system for 2 houses, and we spent $100,000. We could have changed all his plumbing, and he actually put it in a location that was best for the system, which was the furthest away from where the sewer come in, so we'll have all that expense and written off. Okay. So, we have kind of a longer, and actually David came up with some pretty innovative thoughts on how to make people whole or partially whole. And the thought was that all that, so that was part of our discussion yesterday.
Are there ways to make people whole, or you just replace your septic and the sewer comes by a year later, you're
Financially whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, sure, there are, and there's been no, the sewer plan work group, which I was our representative on, was not tasked with looking at anything other than how to finance, and we came up with a 50/50 as a result of a lot of discussion about this. But, there are, and in that discussion, there were people from town members who were on the committee who had legitimate issues about the fact that they won't directly benefit from sewer, because when it's septic and probably all is big. So the challenge is, how do you put together a system that pays homage to the fact that they're not going to get the full benefit? Recognize they're going to get some benefit because the water quality in the harbors and whatnot are everybody, and they're everybody.
Let's just try it.
And, there are ways to do it. And one of the things we talked about is, you've got a septic system, every 2 years, you have to turn in a report showing it's in full working order, and if you do that, licensed whatever, then you'll get a tax credit. It won't be 100% of what you would have paid on your tax bill for sewers, but it might be 50%, which represents the value you receive from having clean water or something. Our conclusion of our discussion yesterday was that there needs to be a political solution to this problem. And right now, we've got, you might call it a political solution, but it's not a solution that's going to have benefit to all of the constituencies.
Well, certainly carving out, you could argue that was a political solution.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm hopelessly politically naive on this, but, it doesn't escape, I don't think, people who are going to pay this, that A, they don't vote,
Right. Oh, yeah.
and B, once this is set and the allocation is set, it's going to be pretty hard to go back in on other areas and argue that it ought to be a different
And
allocation.
that's what I was
So,
thinking.
you basically skirted the real tough politics of this issue by basically sticking it first to the people that don't vote.
And people will figure that out. People who don't like this. So it's kind of cut the baby in half.
Yeah, but
Just
Jim, also,
slowly.
the people who, Ryan, you were telling me numbers, there are people that might be looking at what, $100,000 worth of
$450,000.
betterment?
450.
There are wealthy people out there, but even that might get somebody's attention.
Over 20 years, that's a heck of a lot.
This is the range between 40 and
That's
40.
like lawsuit territory to me.
Oh, I got a feeling that this
If
is.
people enough money present with a betterment of $500,000, they're going to spend some lawyers' money, fees to make a little trouble on that.
You could say that there are no grounds, they know that they're still gonna go tie up in court. That's the rule.
Yeah, you also risk that whole dynamic of, some are people willing to, pay some extra taxes because they, have nice streets and sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. But this could just be over the top. And they also could pick, look, I just had a personal experience with folks in Monomoy who said that for some, that it was, they came up with reasons not to do a project there, and they very quickly came up with a pretty sizable fund to hire some pretty well-known attorneys and public relations firms, and they were successful in their goal.
Well, they were successful in getting the hospital to listen to it.
Question for Carol. This whole, all four components was $119 million. Does the wastewater management program plan require, are there other neighborhoods that are, is this the beginning beginning, or is this the whole thing that's required by by the feds or the wastewater management program?
There's more.
And what's phase 2 or 3? What's the next part that they're supposed to do?
The consultant recommended Nantucket, Lawrenceville, and Somerset first. The next was Monmouth and Plus. After that was Comet Pond North and South, and lastly was Mike.
Yeah, that's right, I remember that now.
So we're not taking the recommendations of the consultant.
And getting them pull things apart, Pond and my comments, scale and expense wise, the same, I don't know if you've done those numbers, but.
Well, we have the plan levels.
But we haven't updated those based on, we have not carried those out to when they projected to be done. We have,
But
the whole package was about 233 million, wasn't it, or something like that originally?
Joe, this is the,
It's gotta be in the warrant because it hasn't been approved.
this was the recommendation of the consultants, and it has the,
What?
Libby, how would we, what would the FinCom need to do to put forward a whole package?
I'm sorry?
Is this on the website?
Yes.
You can't add it to this one, because this one is done.
You have to call a special town meeting. That's a regular citizen. They could, yeah. Yeah. If I may, the warrant is approved, it is what it is, so our job is to deal with the warrant, and I don't want to tell your job. Our job is to deal with the warrant, so if anyone wanted to entertain putting back in Nantucket, Warren's Landing, and Somerset, it would almost they'd have to get the signatures for a special town meeting to have within this town meeting.
Or you could recommend to the selectmen that you think they should
Or open back up the warrant, I
have a
guess.
special town meeting. At this point, they'd have to add a special to it.
Yeah. Either way.
Can they open up the warrant and have it back?
No, it's too late for that. They'd have to call a special.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's not totally unheard of to call a special at the end.
No.
Yeah, they
It
have
gets a little confusing.
special within
Would, logistically, would the easiest way just to get signatures, or have the board do it? Just in your
Well,
opinion?
logistically, having the board do it,
Okay.
but
All right. Well, with that in mind, if I make a suggestion, if this committee feels strongly to open that back up, then we should convey that through you to them. Yeah.
and/or I don't know how you feel about the special in the fall. Because I think we're looking at that with a couple other potential things.
Isn't the center of this group that the project should be put forward as a whole project, either a special within this town meeting or all?
I'd like to see it come forward as soon as possible, and then have if there's gotta be a fall anyway, we can, if we need a second crack at it, we can use that. Inflation doesn't work like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I don't know, it's gonna be half. In a 6-month period.
Under which goal this work is supposed to be done? Or it just shows we're making progress?
We have to show progress.
Other thoughts on that?
Well, I think the first step would be, Mr. Chairman, is to gauge how this committee feels about doing that. And if I think time is of the essence if we're going to do that. So I think the sooner we come up with a conclusion for ourselves, then convey that to the selectmen.
So let's just maybe take a poll.
Sure,
or
that's what I would suggest.
Go around the table and tell us, Stephen's kind of said,
For myself, seeing these numbers, by the way, Brian, thank you, very good numbers, but I was, for the past couple of years, I was under the understanding that Nantucket and Warren's Landing and Somerset were a little bit more important, so I am of the feeling that instead of putting it off for political reasons, and we don't have to be political here, is that we should entertain the idea of conveying to selectmen to open a special town meeting for that right now.
actually from a financial, if you look at financial, we should get $100.
Mhm.
That's just,
I would agree, and I think just from the, and Kara and I think Brian would agree, just from, for that, and that's another one of the.
Well, maybe I'm missing the forest through the trees, but why I wanted to see what it was at 100% on the tax roll is because personally, I'd rather pay $300 or $400 more on my taxes and pay for all the sewer versus some guy in Monomoy is paying $450,000. I don't think that's fair as a citizen or that. So I guess my argument would be at the special town meeting or any town meeting would be to show numbers to people to say, you know, we all pay $300 or I pay $47 and you pay $10,000. What do you want to do?
On a purely financial perspective, I think it ought to come all together. You know, and that, you know, it's good. It's not as though the problem's going to go away. That's the challenge. I mean, this isn't a.
It's pay me now or pay me later.
Right. And, you know, we know that at least in the horizon that we have, that interest rates are still pretty low. They're low, they go up if you don't get SRF funding. We do put that at risk, and we have project escalation costs. And so from a just purely, what are we going to end up having to spend? I'm in favor of having the whole thing looked at once. And like as Stephen points out, if the voters don't want to do it that way, then they've had a chance to make their feelings known.
I would like to
And then
see-
I also think there's an equity issue, which, you know, we don't state it correctly.
I heard someone say we're not political, but I think that's good to remember. Who said that? No one said that.
I'll take credit.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
I don't, I forget what I always said. Well, I mean, our responsibility. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, you know, at the time, my solution, like 4 years ago, was fill in Hither Creek, and no one got no one really got.
Gee, I wonder why.
That was a really good idea. So since we can't fill in Hither Creek, I
That's
think
right. Make it a landing strip.
I think that, you know, the consultant says to us that Nantucket, Orange Landing, that was top priority. Now, maybe we should argue with the consultant. My problem is that if there's other reasons that I don't know about, or why the selectmen would want to flip-flop it, if they did it simply because they said, let's get the easy one over first, my point is, you know, you're playing games. The point is, we're going to have to spend the money anyway, and so, in fact, I think what David said is that we ought to lay it out the whole. I think we ought to lay out the whole plan and then say, and here's, you know, as part of the explanation, and say, here's the part we want to bite off now, so that people really understand that this is just step one, and that it's very clear about it. You know,
The 120, 119 is step one.
now,
There's more coming after that.
That's another 110 after.
yeah. No, I mean, we've got a long haul to go here, and we got to get started somewhere. Now, the question of where do we start is obviously now, the Board of Selectmen feels that we should start at a different point than we've been talking about in the past. And if all that is, if the only reason they said that is because they felt it was more palatable for the townspeople at the town meeting to go with number one in an area that has less voters, minuscule voters actually, and so the whole thing is so that item is going to be the easy one to pass. My point is, then next year we come around and we have the hard item now. So what are we going to do then? My point is, in for a penny, in for a pound. You go for what's most important.
suggested what we just did, which is go around the table.
Mm-hmm.
A question to Kara, what's this do with the state if we drop Nantucket Warren's Landing with a consent order?
Well, we lose the 0% interest and have to refund. But, as long as we show them that we are moving forward, I don't believe that we would get, a consent order.
So,
Back to the whole overall, you made us some great points. And if we go forward with this 60/40, and then we guessing the town attorney would go along with this with me, and then we try to pass, say, Somerset, and we do it something different, now all of a sudden it's disparaged treatment, and it caused a big problem, and we're putting ourselves in a, there's all kinds of things. I wasn't on these committees, and I didn't discuss these things, but it just seems like we're setting ourselves up for
I'm
trouble.
hearing consensus around some communication to the Board of Selectmen that for financial and other reasons, Finance Committee prefers to have the $119 million be brought to the town voters as a package.
Yeah.
With options for pay for it. No, that's just me.
Impact on our bond rating if we drop 120?
Well, they know about it.
So,
I think that the impact on the bond rating will be dependent on on a couple of things. It'll be dependent on the rest of the financing or capital improvement that we have out there that is going to be paid for by the general fund, and what the split is. I mean, I don't know what it will do. I suspect that they will look at it if you put it 100% with all the other stuff that we have, and it may start to raise that might raise a flag. I don't know. I mean, we have disclosed to them that we are pursuing projects, and that we do not know what the ultimate split on these projects would be at this time, but we have disclosed to them that we are going to be pursuing some. The impact, like I said, would really be probably predicated on what percentage is going to be recouped through taxes on top of what else we're telling them is going to be coming down the pipe, i.e. higher island home and so on and so forth. So I can't tell you whether it will or not have, what the impact might be, because it's still dependent on a lot of factors that are not settled yet.
Brian, I think that answer is tax finance better than betterment finance, or is either
Well,
way?
betterment financed there would be no impact to the tax rate, so we wouldn't have any general obligation bonds we'd be selling. It would be 100, if we financed it all by betterment, it'll all come from the residents, so there would be no, the funding source wouldn't be the tax rate. What they're looking at
So
is,
100% betterment has zero, would have zero impact on the bond rate.
well, I think there would be some impact or some consideration given, because when we finance it, we're backing the debt with the full faith and credit of the town, so we would still have some, regardless of how it's paid. But I think that that would be 100% financed by betterments would somewhat mitigate that risk. When we start financing it in portions, with the part being on the tax rate, then they look at the overall debt scope, so that is being financed through there. So I don't know if it ultimately will have that great of an impact until realistically, until we settle on what the percentage looks like, because they're not going to tell me if I say, by the way, if we do this, what's it going to do? I mean, they're going to look at it as a whole scope of what we're laying out, so they know about it. Though.
Getting back to what we were talking about, I'm trying to find a consensus point. Just talk to you again, there seems to be a consensus around giving a message from the board, or suggesting to the board that for financial and other reasons, we bring forth this entire package of 120 here. So, would anybody like to, anybody like to make a motion around that?
You need a motion?
If you like a motion, I'll make a motion. Ah,
Is there a second?
just in the nick of time.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no?
These guys just keep voting all the time.
Wait till you see me voted on. I'm going to enjoy this.
split's not gonna be in the article?
It would be in the motion. It would be in our motion.
Right, okay, well, that would be printed, but, so are we obligated, are we as a committee obligated to build a 60-foot?
No. And in fact, if I make a suggestion on that, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, it might behoove us to, since David to weigh in, but also I was going to suggest Nancy Wheatley, invite her to attend a meeting at some point to give the logic of the sewer work group on the 50/50.
Well, I can tell you,
Or that's fine, I don't want to put you on the spot, but go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
you're not putting me on the
Yeah.
spot at all. You know, we had an awful lot of discussion about that. We had votes up to 75 tax rate and 25 betterment. And then we're 6-2. I mean, we started at basically 40, 60, what's up here, and kept on escalating. And we had majority support, and we just stopped at 75. Quite frankly, it would have kept on going.
Okay.
So, for the purposes of trying to get to a unanimous position, we came back to 50-50, and that was sufficient to attract the votes of who's doing that. There are a couple people that are totally in.
Right, we've been down that road before.
Yeah, and so that's where we came back to. But the other part of that was that we also did not have these numbers. We had different set of numbers, which were lower. In some cases, considerably lower, which I don't think.
That's fine.
I don't know
They were
how
higher.
people would have reacted.
They were higher.
They were higher because we were using interest on everything. So you're at 50/50.
Capital cost.
Oh, the capital costs, yes, excuse me, yes. The capital costs were lower because we just got that done, so.
But I think,
yeah.
but the numbers you're saying, that's the numbers I think I remember seeing last spring, is that what we're talking about? I think I
Well,
remember
I mean,
those.
these numbers are very recent.
Right,
okay?
these are.
So what the sewer planning work group was looking at numbers that, from a perspective where the total projects, all four were 95 million. So the
Okay.
24 million has been in the last 3 weeks as we reconfigured to do
Okay.
this. So when they
17.
voted the 50/50, they had lower construction costs, but we also were including
Higher.
we didn't have concrete answer on whether it would be eligible for 0% interest, so there were some other numbers that were different as well. There was a little bit of a change there that's came as we've been able to finalize this to a more certain degree.
So does that answer everybody's questions?
How about the allocating on land value versus people? Is that also going to be part of our motion, or is that going to be built into the article?
That was that would not be, how the betterment is assessed would not be part of the motion. That was the recommendation of the sewer planning work group to the selectmen, was to use land value, and David probably would be a better spokesman as to the rationale behind that. I don't want to speak for the committee in terms of why they chose that. They asked to look at other options, and that was.
Where does it get, approved?
The betterment assessments are within the sole purview of the board, and how they're assessed and what basis. There are some statutory bases.
That would be a question that comes up at town meeting floor.
Well,
Even though it's within the purview, I'm sure the question will be asked of the board.
yeah, and I think they seem to have accepted the work group's recommendation to base it on land value, so I'm sure.
Did they take a motion to that effect?
I don't think the vote was in that level of detail at any one point. It was basically receiving the report of the work group, taking it under consideration, subsequently agreeing, voting on the 60/40. I think it was always with the understanding that it would be based on the land value. There was never any, I don't think there was much discussion at all.
Well, that's an important issue.
Yeah. I see the written specs here, and my question would be, the understanding is that the 60/40 split, understanding is it based on land value?
Yeah, I think Libby's right, we didn't address that specifically, but I think it's clear in my mind that almost everybody assumes and accepts and would support a system that in effect is, I use the word progressive, but if you own a large lot that's valued at 6 times your neighbor's, you're gonna pay a lot larger betterment, whatever the betterment percentage is, than other people. I mean, I think of this, David, you can comment, I don't know if this is where the committee was, you could either do it by frontage or lot value, or maybe the same for every single lot or whatever. This is one way to be, in a sense, progressive. The more value in the lot, the more they're gonna pay for the privilege of having sewer.
The larger lots could be subdivided.
What strikes me is that I'm thinking of the presentation in the warrant article, the presentation to the community. And if this isn't going to be part of the community, you're asking them to, if this isn't going to be, if that part is not going to be part of the presentation, then you can't throw up numbers like this for them, because those numbers are based on certain assumptions.
So John, I think you're right.
I understand.
I mean, I would assume that, I'm not, Libby has a work group that's meeting with the consultants and so forth, but it would seem clear to me that any time we get out and get in specific answers to groups of citizens and get ready for town meeting, I would assume one way to deal with that question is to bracket it and help people understand that a lot valued with a land value of $2 million in Monomoy is going to pay a betterment under this assumption of X, and a guy with a lot valued at $500,000 is going to pay Y, and they'll get the idea of the spread pretty quickly. It's the same thing about taxes in effect, John. It's the same kind of difference. The guy with a larger assessment is going to pay more taxes, and the same thing is here on his 50% or 60% or whatever it's going to be. He's going to pay a larger tax. So.
It's not clear to me how you present that, but it seems to be, it has to be done very carefully. It seems to me that the Board of Selectmen are really going to have to make a commitment prior to the meeting, because of a certain way to go, because people don't want to know. And even though we don't put it in as part of the thing, there has to be something. Somebody's got to get up at the meeting and say,
Right now, the board's position is the 60/40 betterment based on the land value.
Yes.
And we are basing all of our educational materials on that. So
Yes.
it will be outlined in there.
okay,
But if there's a change, then, then that's all not going to be accurate anymore.
So on a spreadsheet, Brian can just put 50 to 60 and he's got it done. So it's not hard to change. It really isn't hard to change.
No, I mean, we can do a range. I could actually just give a range for the areas and say the betterments range from this to here.
Well, that's what we get at. So
You know,
whatever your area, and if we're talking now about Monomoy and the plus lots,
And we could actually-
it's a lot easier.
We could create a spreadsheet that gives the total land value for the area, so that they could actually look their land value up, calculate what the percentage is, and do it themselves.
It's really not any different than taxes.
No,
We go
it's
to
not.
people, we say, your debt service is $5 per 100, and they go home and they figure it out. They've got 5,700s and they know what's gonna happen.
yeah, but in this case, you're going to bracket it, so they'll say, which is it?
Yes, anyway, it's not hard, it's just a direct ratio. So each lot is gonna have, if the total betterment in an area is $50 million, just to take it, every lot is gonna have a certain percentage of that betterment.
Eliminate
And
it.
Ryan can add up their assessment.
We had the discussion we had before.
I get 2%, the guy next to me gets 10, and
They're
the other
both
guy gets
valid
20.
discussions.
A half a percent, whatever the math is.
I think we should tell them what we're going to do.
Ryan, isn't that how it's gonna work?
That's how it's done.
That's how it's done.
It's already done. I already know them,
So
so.
I think we've had lots of
That's what I'm saying.
conversation.
No, it's a good point.
On the-
No, you're right.
There's regular people that live all year.
I'm gonna, there's no other business to come before the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion just before we do that. Going back to the motion we voted on before. So you will draft a letter. Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. Yeah. So.
We'll accommodate that in our agenda.
So
Anything else?
you will accommodate the change?
Yes.
So that, okay, all right, I just wanted to make a note because I was, so.
Okay.
Okay,
We adjourn?
we're all set to go.
Thank you.
Actually, yeah.
Well-
Jim.
The game's
Jim.
ready.
Jim. Jim.
Like you said, anything out here, Bennett's, Philadelphia, Forever.
Can't do it Tuesday.
That's good.
Can't do it Tuesday because we have to have yet another meeting with family and children.
So, we were gonna suggest you make it one. Just go
That's a
over
good
it.
idea, yeah,
But
yeah.
I emailed him earlier, we didn't get back, so you guys, say about Tuesday.
He just said that he's gonna accommodate, because he's requested the next meeting.